My daughter, Melissa, always had a way of making big requests sound like small favors. So when she called me on a Tuesday afternoon, her voice bubbling with manufactured excitement, I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. She was talking about a family vacation to Disney World, a last-minute trip, just 2 weeks away. It was a peace offering, she claimed, a chance for us all to reconnect. But they didn't book me a seat next to the toilet just for fun. No, this was a calculated insult. So I upgraded myself to first class, reported their credit card as stolen right in the middle of the flight, and then I left them stranded at the airport. Their vacation turned into a nightmare. But my story is about finally finding my own voice. Before we dive into all the juicy details of how I turned their world upside down, I'd love to know where you're all watching from. It's amazing to think this story is reaching people all over the globe. Drop your city or country in the comments below and let me know what time it is where you are. It's about 2 in the afternoon here, and the Florida sun is beating down, reminding me of that fateful trip. Now, where was I? Yes, the phone call. "We'd love for you to come, Mom," Melissa chirped, her voice a little too bright. "It'll be so much fun for the boys to have their grandma at Disney." I'm Carol, by the way. I'm 72 years old, a retired English teacher, and a widow. My life since my husband, Tom, passed has been quiet. I live in the same small house in suburban Florida that we bought 40 years ago. It's filled with books and memories, and lately, a growing sense of being peripheral, an afterthought in the lives of the people I raised. As Melissa was talking, I heard a shuffling sound, and then the unmistakable booming voice of my son-in-law, Kevin. He wasn't speaking directly into the phone, but his words cut through the line as clear as day. "Just invite her, Mel. What's the harm? She doesn't cost much. Just make sure she knows not to be high maintenance." A wave of heat washed over my face. Not cost much. Not high maintenance. It was the language one uses for a piece of luggage, not a mother. Melissa laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Oh, stop it, Kev. She's easygoing, just a little old-fashioned." She then raised her voice for my benefit. "So, what do you say, Mom? It's all taken care of." I should have said no. I should have told her I heard every word. But years of being the peacemaker, the one who smooths things over, are a hard habit to break. So I swallowed the lump of anger in my throat and forced a smile into my voice. "That sounds wonderful, dear. Thank you for thinking of me." A few days later, I drove over to their sprawling new-build house for dinner. I brought a nice bottle of Cabernet, Tom's favorite. Kevin, a man who always seemed to be appraising the cost of everything, gave the bottle a cursory glance before setting it on the granite countertop. "Thanks, Carol," he said, his focus already back on the stock market ticker flashing on his giant television. During the meal, he regaled me with tales of their financial prowess, how they'd managed to swing this dream vacation through clever planning. He shot me a look over his wine glass. "It's a good thing you don't mind flying coach, Carol. Otherwise, this whole trip would have been a non-starter budget-wise." Melissa chimed in, changing the subject just a little too quickly. "Oh, Mom, I saw our neighbor Sharon the other day. She said you were looking fantastic and seemed so wonderfully independent." I knew Sharon. Sharon was a gossip who saw what she wanted to see. "That's nice of her," I said, picking at my salmon. I could see the narrative they were building. Mom is fine. Mom is independent. Mom doesn't need anything from us. It was a convenient story, one that absolved them of any real responsibility or consideration. It was the perfect excuse for their own neglect. I smiled and thanked them for the lovely dinner, my heart feeling like a lead weight in my chest. I knew this vacation wasn't a gift. It was an obligation they were fulfilling with the least possible effort. I just smiled through it, keeping my mouth shut, being the easy one. But I wouldn't be easy for much longer. I smiled and thanked them, but I knew in my gut this trip wasn't a fairy tale. And I was right, in a way I couldn't have possibly imagined. The email arrived the following Monday. The subject line was curt, "Your flight info." No, "Hi, Mom," no, "Can't wait to see you." Just the cold transactional words. Melissa had attached the confirmation email with a single line in the body of the email. "Got your tickets sorted." I clicked the link, a flicker of hope still fluttering in my chest. Maybe Kevin's comments were just his usual tactlessness. Maybe Melissa had made sure I was comfortable. The page loaded. My eyes scanned for my name. Carol Peterson. And next to it, the seat assignment that felt like a slap in the face. 42E. It wasn't just a coach seat. It was the worst possible seat on the entire aircraft. A middle seat, in the very last row. The kind of seat that doesn't recline, pressed up against the wall of the galley. And its prime feature? It was directly adjacent to the two rear lavatories. I could already imagine it. The constant traffic, the flushing sounds, the chemical smell, the people queuing up, bumping my elbow every 5 minutes. My gaze drifted up the virtual seating chart, and there they were. Melissa, Kevin, and their two sons, Josh and Ryan, all sitting comfortably in row 12. Comfort Plus. Extra legroom, priority boarding, complimentary snacks. The disparity was so blatant, so shameless, it took my breath away. They hadn't even tried to hide their contempt. I sat there in my quiet kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the window, and stared at the screen for a full 20 minutes. My coffee grew cold. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made, the college tuition I helped pay for, the down payment on their first house I gifted them after Tom passed, the countless weekends I'd babysat so they could have their date nights. I didn't ask for luxury. I never have. All I ever wanted was a little dignity. A strange thought surfaced, a memory of Kevin always insisting on helping me with my online bills. "It's all automatic now, Carol," he'd say, waving away my attempts to log in myself. At the time, I thought it was kind, if a little patronizing. Now, a cold suspicion began to creep in. Driven by an instinct I couldn't explain, I went to my laptop and opened my email account. I used the search bar, typing in the name of the airline. The confirmation email from Melissa popped up. But then I tried something else. I typed in the word rewards. And that's when my world tilted on its axis. Buried deep in my spam folder, nestled between ads for walk-in tubs and reverse mortgages, was an email from 6 months ago. The sender was Sunshine Rewards Visa. The subject, "Congratulations on your new card, Carol." My blood ran cold. I clicked it open. The email was a welcome letter, congratulating me, Carol Peterson, on the approval of a new premium travel rewards credit card. My name, my home address was listed as the primary, but the mailing address for statements and the card itself, it was Melissa and Kevin's house. They had used my name, my excellent credit score that Tom and I had spent a lifetime building, and my identity to open a credit card for their own use. Every vacation, every fancy dinner, every online shopping spree, they were funding it all on my good name, while I sat at home eating leftovers. The Disney trip, the Comfort Plus seats, all of it was likely paid for with points they'd earned by pretending to be me. I felt a profound, chilling sense of violation. It wasn't about the money. It was the deception, the deep, calculated betrayal. They saw me not as a mother, but as a resource to be exploited. An old woman, too out of touch to notice she was being robbed blind by her own family. I sat frozen at my kitchen table, the silence of the house pressing in on me. They thought I was invisible. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I couldn't stomach it. Instead, I got dressed in my Sunday best, a pressed blouse and a sensible skirt, the kind of outfit that says you mean business. I drove my 10-year-old Buick not to the grocery store, but downtown, to the main branch of my bank. The marble floors and hushed atmosphere usually felt intimidating, but today they felt like an arena, and I was ready for battle. I asked to speak with a personal banking manager. A kind-faced young woman named Jessica led me to her small, quiet office. She had warm eyes, but I saw the familiar flicker of pity in them that people often have when dealing with the elderly. It was a look I was starting to despise. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Peterson?" she asked gently. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. The suspicious credit card, the email from my spam folder, and the fact that my name and address were used without my knowledge. I watched as her expression shifted from polite sympathy to professional concern. She typed rapidly on her keyboard, her brow furrowed. "Okay, I see it here," she said after a few moments, turning the monitor so I could see. "A Sunshine Rewards Visa account was opened 6 months ago. You are listed as the primary cardholder." She clicked a few more times. "Oh, my." "What is it?" I asked, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "There are quite a few transactions, Mrs. Peterson. It looks like the card has been used extensively." She began to list them off. Flights to Aspen last winter, a recurring monthly wine club subscription, several charges from high-end department stores, dozens of restaurant bills from downtown Orlando. She paused, then pointed to a line on the screen. "And it looks like the card was used to purchase 4 tickets to Disney World, plus a 5-night stay at their Grand Floridian Resort?" The name of the luxury hotel hit me like a punch to the gut. They were staying in the lap of luxury while I was relegated to the toilet seat. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. All of the shipping addresses for the merchandise and the mailing address for the statements and the card itself, it was Melissa and Kevin's house, she said, showing me Melissa and Kevin's street. "Do you recognize it?" "It's my daughter's house," I said quietly. Jessica's professional demeanor softened. She leaned forward, her voice low. "Mrs. Peterson, this is a clear case of identity theft and financial fraud. We need to freeze this account immediately and file a report. I can help you with all the paperwork." This was it, the moment of truth. I could bring the hammer down. I could call the police, ruin their credit, perhaps even their lives. A part of me, the angry, wounded part, screamed to do it, but another part, the mother in me, hesitated. I thought of Melissa. I thought of my grandsons. Then I thought of Kevin's smug face, his dismissive words. They weren't just careless, they were cruel. They deserved a lesson, but a public explosion wasn't my style. I preferred a quieter, more precise kind of justice. Now, I want to stop here for a second and ask you all something. Faced with this kind of betrayal from your own child, what would you have done? Would you have called the police right away, or would you have handled it differently? Let me know your honest thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. I looked at Jessica, my mind racing. "You said we need to freeze the account." Began slowly, "But what if we don't? Not right away." Jessica looked confused. "But, Mrs. Peterson, they could run up more debt." "I have a different idea," I said, a plan forming in my mind, sharp and clear as glass. "Is there a way to put a special security alert on the account? Not a full freeze, but something that would flag a large, out-of-state transaction? Something that would require direct verbal confirmation from me, the primary cardholder, before it's approved?" Jessica blinked, catching on. A slow smile spread on her face. "You mean you want to let them think the card is working right up until the moment they need it the most?" "Exactly," I said, a strange sense of calm settling over me.
They thought I was a sweet, harmless old lady, too frail to fight back. They forgot that I was the one who taught them how to play the game, and I was about to remind them, in no uncertain terms, that the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. The day of the flight arrived encloaked in the thick, humid air of a Florida morning. I was up before the sun, a strange energy thrumming through my veins. I didn't pack much. I chose my most comfortable plants and a soft lavender cardigan that had been Tom's favorite. On my wrist, I wore his old watch, a sturdy, classic timepiece that still ticked with a reassuring rhythm. It felt like I was wearing a piece of his strength. Melissa had texted me the night before. Flight is at 10 a.m. Be at MCO by 8:30. We'll meet you at the gate. No offer to drive me, no suggestion to meet for coffee beforehand, just instructions. I didn't reply. I had my own itinerary. I arrived at Orlando International Airport at 7 a.m., a full 3 hours early. The terminal was already bustling with a chaotic energy. Families in matching Mickey Mouse shirts, business travelers striding purposefully, the low hum of 1,000 different journeys beginning. I rolled my small navy suitcase behind me, feeling an odd sense of anonymity and purpose. Ignoring the sprawling self-check-in kiosks, I walked directly to the full-service check-in counter for the airline. I approached a young woman with a bright, professional smile and a name tag that read Maria.
"Good morning," she chirped, her tone the one people reserve for children and the elderly. Warm, but slightly patronizing. "Are you checking in for a flight today?" "Yes, I am," I said, my voice firm and even. I slid my driver's license across the counter. "I need to make a change to my reservation." Maria's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Okay, let me just pull up your booking." She typed, and her eyebrows knitted together. "I see you here, Carol Peterson. You're in seat 42E. She hesitated, glancing at me. "That's in the rear of the aircraft." "I'm aware of where it is," I said, leaning in just a bit. "That's precisely why I want to change it." She gave me a practiced, apologetic shrug. "I'm so sorry, man, but the flight is very full today. Coach is almost completely booked. I can move you to an aisle seat in row 38, but that's the best I can do." I held her gaze. "And what about first class?" Maria blinked, taken aback. The question seemed to hang in the air between us. "First class? Ma'am, that would be a significant upgrade. The fare difference—" "I'm prepared to pay it," I said, cutting her off smoothly. I reached into my purse and pulled out my own credit card, the one Tom and I had shared for 40 years, the one my children knew nothing about. It was our dignity fund, our secret stash for emergencies, or, as it turned out, for reclaiming one's self-respect. I placed it firmly on the counter. The surprise on Maria's face was immensely satisfying. Her entire demeanor shifted. The patronizing warmth was gone, replaced with crisp efficiency. "Of course, Mrs. Peterson. Right away. Let me see what's available for you." Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Within 2 minutes, she was sliding a new boarding pass towards me. Seat 2A, a window seat, in the quiet, spacious cabin at the very front of the plane. "Thank you, Maria. You've been very helpful," I said, taking the pass. As I put my credit card back in my wallet, I paused, as if a thought had just occurred to me. "Oh, one more thing," I said, keeping my tone casual. "The original ticket was booked on a different card, a Visa card also in my name. I have reason to believe that card may have been compromised. In fact, I'm in the process of filing a fraud report. I would feel much safer if the airline could put a note on the reservation, just to verify all charges associated with that booking. I wouldn't want any fraudulent activity to continue." Maria's eyes widened slightly. She understood immediately. This was no longer a simple seat change. It was a security issue. "I understand completely, Mrs. Peterson," she said, her voice now low and serious. "I will flag the entire reservation for a mandatory payment verification. Our security team will be alerted. Thank you for bringing this to our attention." I smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "Thank you." I walked away from the counter, my new boarding pass in hand, my small suitcase rolling silently behind me. The weight that had been sitting on my shoulders for weeks seemed to lift. I wasn't just changing my seat on a plane, I was changing the entire trajectory of my life. And the view from the front was already looking spectacular. Navigating through airport security felt different this time. With my first-class ticket, I was directed to a shorter, faster lane. There was no huffing, no eye-rolling from impatient travelers behind me. The TSA agent who checked my ID even wished me a pleasant flight. It was a small thing, but it felt monumental. It was the simple currency of respect, something I hadn't realized I'd been so starved of. The first-class lounge was an oasis of calm amidst the terminal's chaos. I settled into a plush armchair, accepted a glass of chilled orange juice, and watched the planes take off and land. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't waiting on someone else's schedule. I wasn't a tag-along, an add-on, an obligation. I was a passenger, in every sense of the word. Boarding began, and I was one of the first to walk down the jet bridge. The flight attendant at the door, a woman with a warm, genuine smile, greeted me by name. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Peterson. Can I take your card again for you?" "No, thank you. I think I'll keep it." I found my seat, 2A, a spacious leather throne by the window. There was more legroom than I knew what to do with. A bottle of water and a small amenity kit were already waiting for me. I settled in, the quiet hum of the cabin wrapping around me like a comforting blanket. This wasn't luxury. This was sanity. This was peace. And then I saw them. The main boarding groups were called, and a river of passengers began to flow down the aisle. I spotted them immediately. Kevin was in the lead, looking flustered as he tried to jam an oversized carry-on into an already full overhead bin. Melissa trailed behind him, trying to manage the boys who were bickering over a Nintendo Switch. They bustled past me, their eyes focused on finding their own row, their own seats in the less glamorous part of the plane. They didn't even glance into the first-class cabin. To them, this part of the aircraft was another world, one I had no place in. But then, as she herded her youngest son down the aisle, Melissa's gaze flickered to the side. Her eyes met mine. For a moment, there was just blank incomprehension on her face. She blinked, squinted, and then tilted her head as if trying to process an image that didn't compute. It was me, her mother, sitting in a first-class seat she hadn't paid for. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply raised my glass of orange juice in a slow, deliberate toast. Her mouth fell open, a small, silent "oh" of disbelief. Kevin, still wrestling with the luggage, nudged her from behind. "Mel, what's the holdup?" he grumbled. She didn't answer, just kept staring at me, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. It was as if she were seeing a ghost who had suddenly decided to haunt the front of the plane. Eventually, the flow of passengers pushed them onward. They shuffled back to row 12, their Comfort Plus seats suddenly feeling a lot less comfortable. I watched them go in the reflection of my window, then turned my attention to the clouds outside. A few minutes later, just before the cabin door was closed, a figure appeared by my seat. It was Melissa. She crouched down in the aisle, her face level with mine, forcing a tight, brittle smile. "Mom," she whispered, her voice a strained hiss, "what are you doing here?" The question was absurd. I turned to her, my expression calm, almost placid. "I'm flying to Orlando, dear. Same as you. Here? In first class? She pressed, her eyes darting around to see if anyone was listening. I nodded slowly. It's a short flight, I said, echoing the dismissive words they had used on me. The color drained from her face as she understood the reference. But how? I leaned in, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I have my own credit card, Melissa. You're not the only one in this family who knows how to book a ticket.
I saw a flash of pure panic in her eyes. It wasn't just about the seat anymore. Her mind was clearly racing, connecting the dots, realizing that my sudden upgrade was not a coincidence. I simply turned back to my window, a silent dismissal. She stood there for a moment longer, speechless, before turning and walking back to her seat like a zombie. The cabin door closed with a satisfying thud. The game was well and truly afoot. The plane ascended smoothly, banking over the patchwork of Florida suburbs and alligator-filled lakes. I watched the world shrink below, feeling my own worries shrink along with it. The flight attendant came by and offered me a warm towel and a choice of beverages. I chose a chamomile tea, its calming scent filling the small space around me. For the first time, I felt the vacation had truly begun. My vacation. I expected an awkward flight. I expected sullen glares from row 12. What I didn't expect was sheer, unadulterated panic. About 20 minutes after we reached cruising altitude, I saw movement in the aisle. It was Kevin, and he was not happy. His face was flushed a blotchy red, and he was power walking towards me, his jaw set in a tight line. Melissa was right behind him, her face pale and worried. He stopped at my seat, looming over me. Carol, he said, his voice low but vibrating with fury. What did you do? I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea before looking up at him. I'm not sure what you mean, Kevin. I'm enjoying a lovely cup of tea. Don't play dumb with us, he snarled. Melissa tugged at his arm, whispering, Kevin, not here. He shook her off. We just got an alert on my phone, an email from the airline. It says there's a payment issue with our booking, with all 4 of our tickets. They're saying the card has been flagged for suspicious activity. I feigned a look of mild surprise. Oh my, you don't say. They said the card used for the booking, the Sunshine Rewards card, has been suspended pending verification. They're checking all the charges right now. What did you do, Mom? I looked from her panicked face to Kevin's enraged one. I placed my teacup carefully back on its saucer. I simply told the truth, I said, my voice as calm as still water. I informed the airline that it wasn't my account, that I didn't open it, that any charges on it were not made by me. Kevin's jaw twitched. We did that for convenience, for the points. I'm sure you did, I replied, my voice gaining a steely edge. But it's funny how convenient things only seem to benefit one side. It wasn't very convenient when you booked me a seat next to the lavatory, was it? A woman across the aisle who had been pretending to read a magazine glanced up over the top of her pages, her eyes wide with interest. Melissa saw it and her face burned with shame. She knelt beside me, whispering furiously, You're really going to do this? On a plane? In front of all these people? You mean like how you humiliated me in an email, I shot back, my voice still quiet but sharp as a shard of glass. Just then, the lead flight attendant, the same woman who had greeted me at the door, appeared as if on cue. She looked at Kevin, who was still standing menacingly over me, and then at me, sitting calmly in my seat. Excuse me, sir, she said, her voice polite but firm. Is there a problem here? Are you bothering one of our first-class passengers? The question, so simple and yet so powerful, hung in the air. One of our first-class passengers. It defined me as belonging here and him as the intruder. Kevin's face went from red to purple. He was speechless. Melissa stood up quickly, grabbing his arm. No, it's fine. We were just talking. This isn't over, Carol, Kevin muttered under his breath as Melissa practically dragged him back down the aisle. He looked like a scolded schoolboy. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the soft leather. The roar of the engines was a comforting hum, a soundtrack to my quiet victory. I felt so light I could have floated right out of my seat. The best part? The show was just getting started.
There was no Wi-Fi package on their suspended card, no in-flight entertainment they could purchase. They were trapped at 30,000 feet with nothing but their own guilt and the consequences of their actions. And I had a front row seat. The rest of the flight was a study of contrasts. In first class, I was served a lovely lunch of grilled chicken salad on a real plate with actual metal cutlery. The flight attendant offered me a glass of Chardonnay, which I politely declined in favor of more tea. I read a chapter of my book, the silence of the cabin broken only by the gentle clinking of glasses. Back in Comfort Plus, a different drama was unfolding. I could see them every time a flight attendant walked by. Their meal orders were denied. Their prepaid snack packages were voided. The boys, Josh and Ryan, were getting restless, their Nintendo Switch batteries long dead, and no way to charge them or purchase in-flight entertainment. Kevin spent most of the time with his arms crossed, staring furiously at the seat in front of him. Melissa seemed to shrink into her own seat, her face a mask of misery. As we began our descent into Orlando, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing our imminent arrival. I looked out the window at the sprawling landscape of Central Florida, a patchwork of green and blue under a brilliant sky. Tom had always loved flying. He said it gave you a new perspective on things. How right he was. When the plane finally taxied to the gate, I gathered my few belongings, feeling refreshed and ready. The flight attendant helped me with my cardigan. "Have a wonderful stay in Orlando, Mrs. Peterson," she said with a knowing smile. "I believe I will," I replied. I deplaned with the first group, walking briskly through the jet bridge without a backward glance. I didn't wait for them. I didn't need to. I knew exactly where they would be. I spotted them near the baggage claim. They weren't waiting for their luggage. They were huddled near the airline's customer service desk, being spoken to by two stern-looking agents and an airport security officer. Their dream vacation had hit a serious snag before it had even left the airport. I could hear snippets of Kevin's angry voice, "This is ridiculous, and you can't just hold us here." As I walked past, the boys, Josh and Ryan, were sitting on a bench nearby, looking bored and confused. I didn't stop. I didn't say a word. It was tempting, believe me. A part of me wanted to walk over and ask if they needed any help, just to see the looks on their faces. But I wasn't there to win a small battle. I was there to win the war for my own self-respect. I walked straight out of the terminal into the warm, humid air of Florida. I hailed a cab, and as it pulled away from the curb, I glanced back at the terminal doors. I could still see them through the glass, trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare of their own making. "Where to, ma'am?" the driver asked.
I gave him the address, not of the Grand Floridian, but of a charming, upscale boutique hotel I had booked for myself in the quiet, beautiful community of Lake Nona, miles away from the manufactured magic of Disney. A hotel with a spa, a quiet pool, and a room with a king-size bed and a balcony overlooking the water. As the cab sped down the highway, I took out my phone. It was time for the final, most important step. I dialed the number on the back of my real credit card and asked to be put through to the fraud department. When a calm voice answered, I took a deep breath. "My name is Carol Peterson," I said, my voice clear and steady, "and I am officially reporting a case of identity theft and financial fraud. The perpetrators are my daughter, Melissa, and her husband, Kevin, and I have all the proof you need." The trap had been sprung. Now it was time to lock the cage. My hotel room was beautiful. It was decorated in soothing shades of blue and white, with a balcony that overlooked a serene, man-made lake. There were no squeals of overexcited children, no booming voice of an entitled son-in-law, no sense of being an unwanted guest. There was only peace. The first thing I did after dropping my bag was to finish my call with the credit card company. I spent nearly an hour on the phone with a patient fraud investigator named David. I gave him everything: the date of the email I had found, the details of the charges Jessica at the bank had shown me, the flight information, and the story of how they had systematically taken over my finances under the guise of helping. I emailed him the screenshots I had taken of the confirmation emails and the seating chart.
David was thorough and professional. Mrs. Peterson, this is one of the clearest cases of familial fraud I've seen. With your official statement and the evidence you've provided, we will launch a full investigation immediately. All accounts associated with the perpetrators that are linked to this fraud will be frozen, pending the investigation. All accounts? I asked. Yes, ma'am. When fraud of this nature is detected, we often place a temporary hold on other accounts held by the individuals to prevent them from moving assets. It's a standard precaution. A quiet, cold satisfaction settled over me. Kevin's whole financial house of cards was about to come tumbling down. "Thank you, David," I said softly. "You have no idea what this means to me." That evening, I had dinner alone at the hotel's lovely terrace restaurant. I ordered grilled fish and a glass of chilled Sauvignon Blanc. I watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. I didn't feel lonely. I felt serene. Later, back in my room, I saw that I had 6 missed calls and a string of frantic text messages from Melissa. I decided to listen to one of the voicemails. Her voice was high-pitched with panic, on the verge of tears. "Mom! Mom, please pick up. I don't know what's going on. We finally got out of the airport, but when we got to the hotel, they said our reservation was canceled. The booking was flagged and the payment didn't go through. Kevin's cards are all being declined. We're stranded, Mom. We're stranded with the kids, and we don't have a hotel room. Why is this happening? Please call me. Please." She didn't sound angry anymore. She sounded scared. A younger version of me, the mother who had always rushed in to fix things, would have felt a pang of guilt. She would have called back, offered to pay for a room, smoothed everything over. But that Carol was gone. I stood on my balcony, looking out at the moonlight shimmering on the water. I remembered when Melissa was 9 years old, she had a terrible nightmare that she was lost and our family had left her behind. I climbed into her little bed, held her while she sobbed, and whispered in her ear, "I would never, ever leave you behind." And I had meant it with every fiber of my being. But standing there now, a 72-year-old woman who had been deemed only worthy of a toilet seat, I understood the difference between letting someone go and being dragged behind by people who never even bother to look back to see if you're still there. I deleted the voicemail. I silenced my phone. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. It was the most peaceful sound in the world, and it was all mine. The next day was a beautiful, sun-drenched Florida day. I slept in late, had a leisurely breakfast by the pool, and even booked a massage for the afternoon. My phone remained silent. I had blocked their numbers temporarily, granting myself a 24-hour reprieve from their chaos. It was blissful. Around noon the next day, I decided it was time. I unblocked them. The flood came instantly. More missed calls, more frantic texts, and a long, rambling voicemail from Kevin. It started out with a falsely calm tone, the one he used when he was trying to sound reasonable, but was seething with rage underneath. "Carol," it began, "I think we need to talk. There's been a massive misunderstanding, a series of banking errors. We've been trying to sort it out, but our accounts are frozen. We had to spend the night in a dingy motel off the highway. The boys are miserable. If this is your way of teaching us some kind of lesson, then fine. Point taken. You've made your point. You've embarrassed us. You can stop now. You could have just said something." He still didn't get it. He thought this was about a single flight, a single seat. He couldn't comprehend that this was about a lifetime of tiny cuts, of being rendered invisible. I didn't call back. Instead, I composed a single text message and sent it to both of them. "I am at the cafe at the Lake Nona Town Center. Meet me here in 1 hour. Come alone, Melissa." Then I turned my phone off again. I chose the location carefully. It was a public, open-air cafe, bright and busy. I sat at a small table under a large umbrella, sipping an iced tea, feeling perfectly calm. Melissa arrived exactly 1 hour later. She looked haggard. Her expensive vacation clothes were rumpled, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She approached my table cautiously, as if I were a wild animal that might bolt. "Mom," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She sat down without being invited. We sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, she broke. "You did this," she said. It wasn't a question. "You froze everything. The hotel, the cards, everything." I just looked at her. Her voice cracked. "Why? Was all of this really necessary?" That was the moment I had been waiting for. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto hers, and I finally let the words come. "Necessary?" I asked. Meaning, was it necessary to stop you and your husband from committing financial fraud using my name? Or was it necessary to remind you that I am still a person with feelings, with dignity? Which one, Melissa? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I, I didn't mean it to be like that. We just thought... Kevin said it was just for the travel points. He said you had so much saved up, you'd never even notice.
No, I said, my voice cutting through her excuses. You didn't think, you assumed. You assumed I was too old, too slow, too out of touch to care about my own finances. You assumed my credit score was your personal expense account. You assumed my good name was yours for the taking. But you never asked, Melissa. You never even had the decency to tell me. Tears started to well in her eyes, but I wasn't finished. This was years of silence, years of being the easy one, all coming to the surface. I sat in silence for years, Melissa, through your sarcasm, through Kevin's smirks, through all the tiny ways you both made me feel like a relic, a piece of worn-out furniture you keep around out of a sense of obligation. Mom, I never knew. Because you never looked, I said, my voice rising slightly. You were too busy to look. I paid off your mortgage for a year when Kevin lost his job, and I never said a word about it. I went through 6 weeks of radiation therapy for breast cancer alone because I didn't want to be a burden on your busy lives. The confession hung in the air between us, heavy and shocking. Her face crumpled completely. The cancer diagnosis was new information to her. The raw, unfiltered truth of my lonely struggle. That was the real cost of their neglect. And for the first time, I think she finally saw it. Melissa just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing silently. The news about my health crisis, a secret I had guarded so fiercely to avoid being a problem, had finally shattered her wall of self-deception. Cancer? You had cancer? When? 2 years ago, right after your trip to Hawaii. You were so excited about it, I didn't want to ruin it for you. The tears that had been welling in her eyes now streamed freely down her face. Oh, Mom. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I know, I said, and the simple words held no accusation, only a profound sadness. That was the entire problem. We sat in a heavy silence, the cheerful chatter of the cafe around us feeling like it was from another universe. She fumbled in her oversized purse, her hand shaking. She pulled out a white envelope and pushed it across the table towards me. "This is from Kevin," she mumbled, not looking at me. I picked it up. It felt thin and flimsy. Inside was a personal check. My eyes went straight to the amount. $5,000. It was a substantial sum, but I knew from the brief glimpse I got at the bank that it was less than half of what they had charged to the fraudulent card over the past 6 months. Tucked in with the check was a small, folded note, written in Kevin's arrogant, slanted handwriting. It contained a single sentence. This should cover any inconvenience. Not an apology, not admission of guilt, inconvenience,
as if his calculated theft of my identity and my dignity were no more bothersome than a delayed flight or a misplaced piece of luggage. It was the final, ultimate insult. The arrogance of it was so pure, so breathtaking that I almost laughed. I looked at the check, then at the tear-streaked face of my daughter. I saw the whole dynamic laid bare. Kevin, the unapologetic manipulator, and Melissa, his complicit, cowed enabler, and me, the bank they both thought they could withdraw from indefinitely. Slowly, deliberately, I took the check between my thumb and forefinger. I held Melissa's gaze, and I tore it in half. Then I tore the halves into quarters. I let the small white pieces flutter from my fingers onto the table between us. Melissa gasped, "Mom, what are you doing? Kevin said that was all he could manage right now." "This isn't about money, Melissa. It never was. This is an insult. This piece of paper is just another way for him to dismiss me, to try and buy his way out of what he did, and it is not for sale." I stood up, my chair scraping softly on the pavement. I looked down at my daughter, a woman I loved but barely recognized anymore. My self-respect is worth more than this. I am worth more than this. And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving her there with the confetti of her husband's pathetic apology. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The weight of their baggage was no longer mine to carry. Walking away from that cafe felt like stepping out of a stuffy, windowless room and into fresh air. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt steady. The ground beneath my feet felt solid for the first time in a long, long time. I didn't leave Orlando right away. My return flight was for 2 more days. They, however, cut their trip short. I later found out they had to borrow money from Kevin's parents to buy last-minute bus tickets back home, a humbling cross-country journey of shame. Melissa sent one final bitter text before they left. "I hope you enjoyed your power play." I read it, and then I deleted it without a response. It wasn't about power. It was about position. For so long, I had accepted the back row, the middle seat, the role of the one who doesn't mind. But being silent isn't the same as being okay. That trip showed me that. I spent my last 2 days in Florida truly on vacation. I visited a botanical garden, losing myself for hours among the vibrant orchids and towering palms. I sat by the pool and read a whole novel, from cover to cover, without interruption. I took a long, solitary walk around the lake at dusk, the sky turning a soft, bruised purple. I thought about Tom, my husband. He had a favorite saying, "You teach people how to treat you, Carol." For years, I had taught my children that my needs came last, that my feelings were negotiable, that my yes was a given. I used to think that made me generous. Now I knew it had just made me invisible. That evening, sitting on my hotel balcony with my laptop, I did something I hadn't done in years. I planned a trip just for me. Not to see family, not for an obligation, but for my own joy. I didn't have to consult anyone. I didn't have to compromise on the destination or the dates. The world felt wide open. I thought about the rolling, sun-dinged hills of California's wine country. I'd always wanted to go to Napa Valley, to see the vineyards, to taste the wine right where it was grown. Tom and I had talked about it, but we never got around to it. So I did it. I booked a flight to San Francisco. I reserved a charming little inn in the town of St. Helena. I even pre-booked a guided wine tour. There would be no group texts, no shared itineraries, no whispered insults. Just me, my book, and a glass of world-class Cabernet. And when it came time to select my seat on the plane, I scrolled right past the economy section. I clicked on first class, and without a moment's hesitation, I selected seat 2A, a window seat. I paid for it myself, with my own card, in my own name. It's funny, isn't it? How something as small as a seat on an airplane can be a perfect metaphor for how you see yourself, or how you allow others to see you. For years, I had let them put me in 42E. Out of the way, out of sight. But that Caro was gone. From now on, I was flying first class in every aspect of my life. When I finally returned to my own quiet home, it felt different. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. It was mine. Sitting on my porch was a medium-sized cardboard box. There was no return address, but I knew who it was from. My hands trembled slightly as I carried it inside and opened it. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was not a cheap apology or a store-bought gift. It was a photo album. A new one, with a simple, dark blue linen cover. I opened it. The first page had a picture of me holding Melissa as a baby, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger. Page after page, she had curated our history. Pictures of me teaching her to ride a bike, of us baking cookies in the kitchen, of the day I pinned the corsage on her for her senior prom. Photos I hadn't seen in years, photos I thought had been lost to time. She had gone through all the old boxes in her attic to find them. I turned the pages slowly, a lifetime of memories washing over me. It was a story of a mother and a daughter, a story that had gotten lost somewhere along the way. I reached the last page. There was a single photo there. It was a recent picture someone had taken of me at a neighborhood gathering, laughing with a friend. I looked happy. I looked visible. And underneath it, in Melissa's familiar, slightly shaky handwriting, were just 7 words. "I'm so sorry I stopped seeing you." I closed the album and held it to my chest. No, I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. This wasn't a magic fix. It didn't erase the hurt or the betrayal. But it was a start. It was a flicker of understanding, a quiet admission that she finally saw me not as a convenience or a resource, but as her mother. I have no idea what the future holds for our relationship. Healing is a long road, and trust, once shattered, is a hard thing to rebuild. But what I do know is this. I found my own voice in the silence. They thought they had put me in the worst seat on the plane, but they ended up giving me the best view of all, a clear view of my own strength and my own worth. I upgraded my ticket, yes, but more importantly, I upgraded my life. And I did it for the same reason they tried to keep me small, because I remembered who I was. Now, I want to turn it back to you all. Have you ever been treated like a burden by the very people you once carried? Have you ever had to fight to be seen by your own family? This channel is a community, a place for us to share these powerful, true stories. Drop a heart in the comments if any part of my journey hit close to home. And please don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and ensures that more stories like this one can be told. Because quiet strength, as I learned, speaks volumes. Thank you for listening.